Hi, I'm Bargain Counter Argument here on YouTube, also available on Instagram. And I'm here to talk about books and related topics while wearing a tiara. It's time for another episode of What I'm Taking Back to the Library. It's time for a book unhaul because they gotta go where they gotta go, I guess, thing. Okay. Okay, I have a couple of items that I have already returned and didn't bother to do a video for because it was just 2 items and I thought I took pictures and I'll drop them in here. And one of them was I got something from the Library of Things at Wallingford Public Library. And Library of Things, for those of you who don't have that in your community or aren't aware of it, that's where you can check out games and puzzles and also certain kinds of objects. You can get binoculars, telescopes, some kinds of sporting equipment, that kind of thing. Well, I got an easel because I was going to use it for a live stream and I didn't end up using it. It was turned out to be a French easel, which is the kind that has not just the easel, but it's got little compartments and palettes for your paints and so on and so forth. And I could not for the life of me figure out how to put it together, and the instructions just did not speak to me. So I didn't end up using it. I'm sure for the kind of person who can figure out how to work that, it would be a really nice thing to be able to borrow from a library, but it just didn't work out for me personally. And it was really silly because if I had realized that when I left, I'm sure one of the staff would have been able to help me figure out how to put it together. But I just brought it home, and then even YouTube was not helpful. The other thing I returned was a DVD, and I'm going to drop a picture of it in here. And it was Random Harvest, which is a movie with Ronald Colman and Greer Garson that came out, I think, in like I want to say 45 or 46, but I'm not sure. I read this book, Box Office Poison by Tim Roby, who was a film critic. Hollywood's story in a century of flops. And he takes a look at movies that cost a lot of money to make, but didn't really make that money back. And he does get into a little bit of the context, but I wish he had done a little bit more to contextualize it in Hollywood's story. These are all Hollywood releases. And nevertheless, it was a good time. It's just more like a bunch of discrete essays as opposed to a comprehensive work. But he is a film critic, so that's kind of what he's used to doing. So I still enjoyed it. And the earliest movie from this was Intolerance, which was released in 2016. And the most recent movie is Cats, that was released in 2019. And we remember it, but not for good reasons. Okay, and now we have a couple of historical romances by Diana Biller. The Widow of Rose House, which was the book club pick for Tea and Biscuits with Tara and B. I'll put a link we discussed it in a live stream where Diana Biller was there and she very graciously answered questions from all of us, and I'll put a link in the description for those of you who missed it, or for those of you who are finding this video and aren't part of that book club. And it's a good time. I would recommend checking it out. I enjoyed this book. It was Diana Biller's first published novel. However, I enjoyed House of Secrets by Diana Biller even more, which was, I think, her third published novel. And it was really a lot of fun. This one is about a scandalous widow who buys a house in Hyde Park, New York. This is in the 1870s. And sets about restoring it, but it's haunted. Maybe, or not. Anyway, and she meets an inventor who wants to help her out. Hotel of Secrets is about a woman who's trying to run a downtrodden hotel, formerly elegant and now kind of on its last legs hotel in Vienna. Also takes place in the 1870s. And an American gentleman comes along and doesn't necessarily want to help her at first. Like I said, I like this one better, and I think that might have had more to do with the setting or the fact that Diana Biller grew as an author. However, I really like this one. I just like this one better. Okay, now looking at a caper romance, Full Speed to a Crash Landing by Beth Revis. Trying to get this so it's not too reflective. It's tricky with library books. which is about 180 pages, and there's a space caper and elements of flirtation, possibly developing into a romance since it's the first book of a series. Not going to say too much about it, except that I really had a good time with it, and after I read it, I wanted to play The Floor is Made of Lava. I hope that's intriguing. Okay, also speculative fiction, moving on toward horror. I Was a Teenage Slasher by Stephen Graham Jones, which is kind of like if you've ever watched or heard of movies like Friday the 13th and you wonder, what is it like to be Jason Voorhees? What would that be like? This book will answer that question. And I think the more familiar you are with horror as a genre, slasher subgenre of horror specifically, the more you might get out of this. But I think even if you have never watched a slasher movie, but you've heard about some of the tropes that are involved, I think you'll still get a lot out of it. I really enjoyed it, so there's that. Okay, moving back to historical romance, we have To Catch a Raven by Beverly Jenkins, the third, therefore final, book of the Women Who Dare trilogy by her. I was asking for recommendations from the historical romance book club, the Tea and Biscuits, for books that readers found empowering, and somebody suggested this, and it is set during the tail end of Reconstruction, so around 1876 or so. There is a caper involved. The characters are African American, and they're really going through it at this point in American history. That does not keep them from having a good time, falling in love, having a lot of joy in their lives, and so yeah, that was a really good time. By the way, this is a discreet cover. This is the large print edition, and they tend to, not always, but they tend to have these kinds of covers that don't really have a couple, in a clinch or whatever. So I will drop in a picture of the cover as you might experience it in other formats. Okay, another short one. The Wood at Midwinter by Susanna Clarke, who wrote Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell and Piranesi. I've read Piranesi, but not Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. This is very short. It's only about 60 pages, and it has a lot of just absolutely gorgeous illustrations. Almost every page has some kind of illustration on it. It's a fable. It's good. I didn't like it as much as I like Piranesi, but it's still a good time, and it's a gorgeous book. Look at that. Just look at that. Look at it. Okay, I'm returning this book, which I didn't read. It's The Relentless Legion by J.S. Hughes. Oh, there we go. As you can see, the library helpfully noted that it is the third book in a series. And I didn't have time to read it. Actually, it's due the day after tomorrow. And I probably, if it were just this book, I would have time to read it. But I have the first two books of the trilogy. I think it's a trilogy. I think she's done with 3, which are I haven't read yet, and I don't have time to read those over the next 2 days. So I'm going to keep those 2 books out and return this one, and then once I've read the first 2 books in the series, I will try to get my hands on it. And one more thing, if you've been watching the channel for a while, you know that for the last 3 weeks now, I've been struggling to watch the 2004 adaptation of The Manchurian Candidate, starring Denzel Washington, Liev Schreiber, Meryl Streep, and Kimberly Elise. I had a copy out from the library and it wouldn't play. So I returned it to that library and got it from another library. Now, this particular library, I had checked this DVD out before and watched it successfully, but that was probably in like 2007. It doesn't play now. So still got to figure out how to watch that. I may break down and actually pay money to rent it on a streaming service. So anyway, that's the stuff that is going back to my local Connecticut library. And yeah, this is a fairly regular feature around here, so I hope you enjoyed it. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Don't. I'm not the boss of you. Have a great day or night.